Chapter 10. Getting Along. They buried Major Hammerbuckle under a willow tree, close to the small stream which ran through the center of the valley. Crodis insisted on building a small cairn to mark the site, but Grog only managed to gather a few stones before needing to sit down and smoke a packed pipeful of Nissen weed. His torso was bruised purple from his left armpit down to his hip, and every movement caused him pain. When night fell, they rolled out their swags and slept beneath the stars. Or at least, Orifim slept. Grog dozed on and off, but was too sore, miserable, and worried about trolls to properly fall asleep. Crodis continued working on the cairn by moonlight. Once he was satisfied with his work, he sat in front of the pile of stones, murmuring low and quiet to himself, or to the gods. Terrian sat on a boulder, keeping watch all night with her fearsome mace by her side. By the time the sun's light began spilling into the valley, Crodis had already lit a fire, extracted some eggs from deep within some soft fabric wrappings, and had begun cooking breakfast. "So, what do we do now?" Orifim asked, wincing as he lowered himself slowly down by the fire. A troll had hammered its fist into the top of his head after Orifim had sunk an axe into its side. The titanium-clad dwarf was suffering from the kind of headache that Grog was only too familiar with, but seemed to have suffered no permanent damage. Grog stared down at his plate and waited for Crodis or Terrian to answer Orifim's question. But nobody spoke. When Grog looked up, he saw that all three of them were looking expectantly at him. "What?" Grog asked. "You're the heroes of this mission. I'm just..." "You are our guide," Terrian said. "Yeah, well, I've done a fucking bang-up job of that so far, haven't I?" Grog said, glancing sideways at Major Hammerbuckle's cairn. "That wasn't your fault," Terrian said. "Hammerbuckle insisted on coming this way. We all heard it." "It is best not to speak ill of the dead," Crodis said, without looking up from his frying pan. Terrian glared down at Crodis. "I'm not speaking ill of him. I'm just stating a fact. Speaking ill of him would be saying that he was a stupid, stubborn fool who should have listened to Grog." Crodis looked up at Terrian, his amber eyes blazing. "And now he lies dead in the cold earth. Is that not punishment enough for his folly? Must he also be insulted and ridiculed?" "He's dead, Crodis," Terrian said. "I don't think he's going to give a shit what I say." "Well, I do," Crodis said, his voice rumbling in his chest like distant thunder. "Crodis!" Grog interjected, desperate to slice into the tension building between the two warriors. "Your eggs are burning, brother." Crodis lowered his eyes to attend to his frying pan. "And fine," Grog continued. "If you want me to guide you, I'll guide you." "So, which way do we go?" Orifim asked. "All the way back along the valley? Back over the spine of the mountain and into Realm 6? The way you wanted to go?" Grog considered. He looked northwest, the direction they'd been travelling, and he looked back to the southeast. "I say from here, our best bet is to keep going. It really will be at least a week longer if we go back now." "But what about the trolls?" Orifim asked, his eyes darting to the recently erected cairn. "There's only 4 of us now, and neither you or I are in the best fighting shape." Grog ran his hand over the place where the black iron rings of blade blunter covered his bruised ribs. "No, I'm definitely not. But by my reckoning, we're not much more than 10 miles from the mouth of this valley. A troll can smell you from about 5 miles off. So, if there was any of the buggers nearby, we'd know about it. That leaves just the final 5 miles of valley where there might be trolls." "You can get plenty killed in 5 miles, Orifim said. Grog took his plate of fried bread and eggs from Crodis with a nod of thanks, and went back to staring northwest. "Aye, you can. But something's different this year." He bit into a slice of bread and chewed pensively. Normally, there'd be troll shit all up and down this valley this time of year. He shook his head. I don't know why, but they're just not here this year, apart from them. He jerked a thumb back towards the corpses of the 3 trolls, which lay some distance behind them. So, you think it's safe to make for realm 13? Orifim asked. Well, I never said it was safe, Grog said. I just said I thought it was probably our best option. For all I know, there's 40 bloody trolls waiting for us just up ahead. But then again, now I've seen this one in action. He pointed a piece of toast at Tyrion. I'm not quite as worried as I was before. Don't you go counting on me to save your fat arse, Tyrion said with a faint smile. I'm just a humble Kavina. You're the living reincarnation of Sigilda the Slayer, that's what you are. Grog said. Where did you learn to fight like that? All the mirth drained from Tyrion's mismatched eyes, and Grog suddenly found swallowing his mouthful of toast very difficult. Let's just say I started young, she said, then turned her attention to her own plate. The weather was fine, and the grassy valley floor sloped gently downwards as they made their way northwest, but progress was still extremely slow. Grog and Orifim had shared a pipeful of Nissen weed before they'd set out, but even with the weed numbing their pain, Grog still walked slow and stiff, and Orifim was moving like a veritable frost slug. He trailed behind, stopping at intervals to closely inspect various rocks, trees, or wildflowers. Grog suspected that the titanium warrior had little experience with the wonderfully medicinal, but also mildly psychedelic, herb, and was experiencing rather too much of the wonders of nature than was appropriate for a realm-saving mission. He shouldn't have smoked so much, Crodis grumbled, as he, Grog, and Tyrion sat eating a meagre lunch and watched Orifim meander up the valley behind them. He's slowing us down. Well, he was thumped right on the noggin by a troll yesterday, Grog said, pinching a rogue cheese crumb out of his beard and popping it in his mouth. He's doing well to be moving at all, to be honest. At least he made it, Crodis said, his eyes downcast. Grog shot a look at Tyrion. Whilst naturally upset and unsettled by the death of Major Hammerbuckle, Grog wasn't in the depths of despair like Crodis seemed to be. Did you know him well? Grog asked. The Major. I met him 3 days ago, Crodis said, during the attack on Longdale. Oh, so you didn't really... Grog had no idea what the right thing to say was, so he decided to give his undivided attention to the hunk of cheese in his hand. He was a good, brave dwarf, Tyrion said, clearly not suffering from the same awkwardness as Grog, but pig-headed and inflexible, like so many of the higher-ranking military types. You're a military type, Crodis growled, and I thought I asked you not to speak ill of the dead. You did, Tyrion replied, her voice as cool as a glacier. But you asking for a thing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. Grog saw Crodis's shoulders stiffen, and his right hand clenched tightly around the handle of his frying pan. In terms of me being a military type, though, Tyrion continued, seeming not to notice Crodis's mounting anger, I exist outside the rank and file. I'm no officer. I'm not like a major or, ancient ones forbid, a general. She raised an eyebrow at Grog. I'm just She looked skywards as she searched for the words. A weapon, Crodis said, his voice a low rumble. A killer. Aye. Yes. Tyrion nodded, seemingly satisfied with the suggestion. Something like that. Hey, Orifim's here, Grog said, trying lamely for the second time that day to hack his way through a solid block of tension. How you feeling, pal? How's the head? Oh, it's light as a dandelion, said. Orifim said. "Oh, and I see we're having lunch." He took the 5 fastest steps he'd taken all day, as he rushed towards the bread, cheese, and dried meat. By mid-afternoon, Grog and his travelling companions were clambering down the steep slope, which led from the mouth of the valley to the vast frost-covered plains of Realm 13. The stream, which had accompanied them on their journey, crashed down rocky rapids and spilled over numerous waterfalls, as it hurried on its way to join the wide, shimmering waters of the northern Oglin River. Scores of sure-footed goats trotted past them as they descended, but despite this glut of fresh meat, they saw no further signs of trolls. Grog knew he should have been nothing but pleased about this fact, but there was something troubling about the almost complete lack of the giant beasts in the mountain pass. There were worse things for mountain trolls to be doing than skulking around in remote valleys and eating goats, and Grog wasn't looking forward to finding out exactly what those things might be. Despite the fact that Grog had made the descent into Realm 13 numerous times during his time in the Northern Mountain Battalion, he still managed to be shocked by how much colder the air became as they reached the base of the mountains and set out across the tundra. No living dwarf knew what kind of lands existed to the northwest of the great mountain ranges which encircled the 13 realms. But both wise dwarves and stupid ones all agreed that those lands must be absolutely fucking freezing. The winds that blasted and howled through every crack, crevice, valley, and pass to the north of Realm 13 were enough to snap a dwarf's beard in half and make his bowels flee in terror for the warmth of his lower abdomen. "Can we stop for a minute?" Orifim called from behind Grog, after they'd been slogging their way through mud and melting snow for an hour. "I think I'm ready for another one of those pipes of yours, Grog." Grog felt like giving Orifim a hug. His ribs had been hurting for quite some time, but he'd feared that if he'd broken out the Nissen weed and shared it with Orifim, he would have faced the steely disapproval of Crodis, and maybe even Tyrion as well. A pain in the side was preferable to the combined glares of both amber and mismatched blue and green eyes alike. Grog had been taking sneaky sips from his whiskey flask, but that had done little to numb the ache, although it had beaten back the cold somewhat. "We will be sleeping before too long," Crodis said. "Can't you tough it out a little longer?" "Ancient ones, Crodis, don't be cruel," Orifim said, rubbing the back of his neck and wincing. "I just need a little puff. It's all right for you to say tough it out. You're not in horrible pain like me and Grog are." Grog thought for a second that Crodis was going to attack Orifim. His orange eyes flared with rage, and his chest rose and fell in a great shuddering breath. "You don't." Crodis closed his eyes and bowed his head for a moment. "Fine." He looked back and forth between Orifim and Grog, the fire in his eyes suddenly extinguished. "Just a little bit. I don't want you slowing us down again." He turned and continued north across the slushy ground. "Oh, he's got issues, that one," Tyrion said, once Crodis was out of earshot. "Good cook, though." Grog looked up from his weed pouches and pipe. "Do you know anything about him?" Tyrion shrugged. "Not really. Broughton seemed to know him quite well. I got the sense that he'd served in some sort of special secret unit before becoming a Kingsguard." Grog struck a match and held it above the chamber of the mahogany pipe that had been included with his pack. He'd barely gotten the chamber glowing before Orifim was at his side, looking at the pipe with eager eyes. "It's mostly short belly leaf," Grog said, handing the pipe over. "I don't want you stopping to investigate every snowflake. Crodis has one hatchet for each of us if we slow him down." They put their packs back on, Grog and Orifim both grunting with discomfort as they did so, and set off after Crodis. "Tyrion, did you want any?" Grog asked, offering the pipe to the Kingdom of War. She shook her head. No thanks, I need to stay sharp. When this is all done, though, when the faith-bound come charging down from the mountain tops and help us massacre every last one of these accursed invaders, then, General Ironheart, we can sit in some tavern together and tell our tales to a merry crowd. Why drink you under the table? I like the sound of that, Grog said, grinning at Tyrion. But I'm telling you now that there's no way in the endless pit of darkness that you are drinking me under anything. We'll see. Grog was about to explain exactly how they would see, when a deep and desperate cry for help came bellowing across the frozen plain. It was Crawdis, repeatedly and ever more frantically roaring for help. But Grog couldn't see him. The enigmatic warrior had done the impossible and managed to disappear completely, despite the tundra being dead flat and virtually featureless for miles in every direction. Help! 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 The urgent shouts died suddenly, and Grog knew what had happened. He dropped the pipe, dumped his pack, and began sprinting towards the place where Crawdis had been only moments before, hoping against hope that he was not too late.